Title: Am I a bad person for secretly resenting my boyfriend? I've been with my boyfriend for almost 2 years, and I don't know how to feel anymore. He's not a bad person, he's kind, funny, and gets along well with my friends and family. But lately, I've been feeling so much resentment toward him, and it's eating me alive. It started small. He never helps around the house unless I ask, and even then it feels like he's doing it begrudgingly. He spends hours gaming or scrolling on his phone, while I'm juggling work, errands, and keeping our place livable. When I try to talk to him about how overwhelmed I feel, he just brushes it off with, "You're better at it than me anyway." But it's not just the chores. I feel like we're on completely different paths. I'm ambitious and working toward big goals, but he's just stagnant. He's fine coasting through life, while I feel like I'm constantly striving for more. It's starting to make me resent him, and I hate feeling this way. The thing is, I still care about him, but I don't know if I love him anymore. Every time he says "I love you," I feel like a fraud saying it back. I don't know if this is something we can fix or if it's a sign that we're just not right for each other anymore. I'm scared to bring it up, because I don't want to hurt him, but I also don't know how much longer I can keep pretending everything is okay. Has anyone else been through this? How do I even start a conversation like this without breaking him? Title: I pretended to understand a deaf person, and now I'm in too deep. This has been weighing on me for a while, and I don't know how to fix it without looking like an absolute idiot. A couple of months ago, I was at a coffee shop when this guy walked up to me and started signing. At first, I thought he was just gesturing, so I smiled and nodded politely. But then he kept going, and I realized, oh crap, he's deaf, and I don't know sign language. I panicked. Instead of telling him I didn't understand, I just kept nodding. I didn't want to seem rude or dismissive, so I gave a few thumbs up, smiled a lot, and even threw in a random wave. He seemed happy enough, and gave me a pat on the shoulder before walking away. I thought that would be the end of it, but apparently, this coffee shop is his regular spot. He started coming up to me every time he saw me, signing enthusiastically, and because I'm a coward who can't admit I made a mistake, I've been pretending to understand him every single time. It gets worse. Last week, he brought me a small gift, this cute little keychain, and signed something I think was about friendship. I obviously couldn't understand, but I smiled, nodded like my life depended on it, and mouthed, "Thank you." I've started avoiding the coffee shop out of sheer guilt, but now I miss my favorite latte. I feel horrible because he seems like such a nice guy, and I've basically been lying to him this whole time. How do I fix this? Do I just come clean? Try to learn some basic sign language, and hope he doesn't hate me for being fake for so long? I really don't want to make him feel bad, or think I was mocking him. I just didn't know how to admit I didn't understand, and now it's spiraled into this massive mess. Lita for asking my friend to pay me back for covering her rent for 3 months? I 26F have a close friend 27F, who's been struggling financially this year. About 6 months ago, she lost her job unexpectedly, and was in a tough spot. She asked if I could help her out with her rent for a while until she found work. I agreed because Sarah and I have been friends for years, and I genuinely wanted to help. Over 3 months, I covered her rent, which totaled about $3,000. She promised to pay me back once she was back on her feet. The thing is, I'm not exactly well off myself. I work a retail job and live paycheck to paycheck, barely saving anything after covering my own bills. Helping Sarah put me in a tough spot, and I had to dip into my small emergency fund to make it work. I figured it would be worth it since she promised to pay me back. Sarah recently found a new job and started earning again. I waited a couple of months before bringing up the money she owed me, trying to give her time to get stable. When I finally asked, she seemed surprised and said she thought it was a gift, not a loan. I told her that I wouldn't have minded helping her, but $3,000 is a lot of money for me, and I was clear when we agreed that she'd pay me back. She said she doesn't have that kind of money right now, because she's saving for a vacation and other necessities. When I pushed the issue, she got defensive and said I was being greedy and insensitive, knowing she had a hard year. She's now refusing to talk to me, and some mutual friends think I'm in the wrong for pressuring her while I'm also struggling financially. Beta for asking her to pay me back when I'm not doing great myself. Am I the asshole for refusing to share my inheritance with my stepsiblings? I 26F recently inherited a significant amount of money from my late mother. She passed away earlier this year after a long illness, and it's been a devastating loss for me. My mom was a single parent for most of my life, and we were incredibly close. She worked hard as a nurse to make sure I had everything I needed. About 5 years ago, my mom married John, who has 3 kids. I was already an adult when they got married, so while I was happy for my mom, I never really bonded with John or his children. They were pleasant enough, but we never blended into a cohesive family. They have their own mom, who is very much in their lives, and they've always relied on her and John financially. When my mom passed, her will explicitly left everything to me, her life insurance policy, savings, and property. In her will, she wrote that John and his kids were not included because she trusted John to handle his own finances, and because she wanted her money to be used to secure my future. She even talked to me about this before her passing, and made it clear that she wanted me to use the inheritance to pay off my student loans. After the will was read, John and his kids were furious. John argued that since my mom had been a part of their family, her money should benefit them as well. John's children said it wasn't fair because they had all loved my mom and considered her a stepmother and accused me of being greedy. The thing is, my mom always went out of her way to include John's kids while she was alive. She'd buy them gifts on their birthdays and for Christmas, help them with small expenses, and treated them kindly. But they never treated her like a mom. They were polite but distant. On family vacations, they'd gravitate toward John or their own mom and leave my mom as an afterthought. I've told them no, this was my mom's money, and she was clear about her wishes. She worked her entire life to give me a good future, and I feel it's my responsibility to honor her intentions. John and his kids don't seem to understand this though. They've been calling me selfish, and John's side of the family has joined in. They've sent me texts saying I'm ruining the family by refusing to share. My dad and my fiancé are both on my side. They say the money is mine, and I shouldn't feel pressured to give it away, especially since it was my mom's explicit wish. But I can't help feeling guilty. I know my mom wouldn't want me to feel bad, but the constant guilt tripping from John and his family is wearing me down. So, Aida for refusing to share my inheritance with my step-siblings? Should I reconsider, or am I right to stand my ground? What's the first sign a kid has terrible parents? 1. I don't know if it's the first sign, but I was teaching a small class of children, and one child in particular would speak very negatively of himself, as though someone in his life, like a parent, had said those things to him on many occasions and he'd internalized them. There was one day in particular he'd answered a question incorrectly, and then proceeded to call himself stupid over and over. I reassured him he's not stupid, but you could tell by the look on this poor boy's face he believed he was. 2. The kid that can't attend anything outside of school hours. I'm not talking about the troublemakers either. I'm talking about high grades overachiever that never gets invited because everyone knows their parents will say no to the smallest inconveniences to their own plans, and their parents are highly discriminatory. The gentrified type with snobbish parents. That kid's entire life is being run by their parents, and they have to comply, or their entire existence, and support as their kid is questioned by them. 100% chance that kid will have severely lacked social skills, and have become a recluse later in life. Don't ask me how I know. My best friend, Hannah, has been dating her boyfriend, Jake, for about a year now. To be honest, I've tried to like him for her sake, but there's something about Jake that I can't shake off. At first, he seemed charming. A little too smooth, maybe, but I figured I was being overly critical. Hannah was head over heels, and I wanted her to be happy. But over time, I started noticing things. Like how Jake never really listens when Hannah talks. She could be pouring her heart out, and he'd be scrolling on his phone or cutting her off mid-sentence to talk about himself. Then there are the little lies. He once told her he was stuck in traffic when he was supposed to pick her up, but when I saw him at the coffee shop near my apartment that same day, he didn't even look surprised to see me. Just smiled, said, "Small world, huh?" and went back to whatever he was doing. The worst part is how he treats her dreams. Hannah's working on launching her own photography business, and she's so passionate about it. But whenever she talks about it, Jake either dismisses her ideas or makes these backhanded comments like, "That's cute, but don't you think it's risky?" He's never outright cruel, but there's this subtle way he belittles her that drives me crazy. Last week, she showed him this incredible photo she took. Honestly, it looked professional level, and all he said was not bad. "Have you seen those AI tools that can do this kind of stuff in seconds?" She laughed it off, but I saw the hurt in her eyes. I don't know how to bring it up to her. She's so in love with him, and I'm scared of coming across as jealous or overprotective. But I can't stand by and watch her shrink herself to fit into his world. I'm trying to decide if I should say something or let her figure it out on her own. She deserves someone who sees how amazing she is, not someone who makes her doubt herself. Aida for not letting my roommate borrow my car anymore. So, here's the deal. I, 27M, have a car that I've worked really hard to maintain. It's not brand new or flashy, just a decent little Honda Civic that gets me from point A to point B. I live with my roommate, Jake, 25M, who doesn't have a car of his own. He claims he doesn't need one, because we live in a city with decent public transportation. A few months ago, Jake asked if he could borrow my car to run some errands. He said it would be quick, so I agreed. When he brought it back, everything seemed fine, and I didn't think much of it. But then it started becoming a regular thing. "Hey, can I take the car to get groceries? Or I need to pick up a friend from the airport." At first, I was okay with it as long as he covered gas when he used it. But then I noticed some small issues. Once, he brought it back with a fast food smell that lingered for days. Another time, he left it with the gas tank almost empty. But the final straw was last week. He took the car to grab something quick, and ended up being gone for 6 hours. When I texted him asking where he was, he said he decided to drive out of town to visit his girlfriend an hour away. To make things worse, when he finally got back, there was a noticeable scratch on the bumper. Jake shrugged it off and said, "Whoa, I think someone must have dinged it in the parking lot. No big deal, right?" I told him I wasn't comfortable letting him use the car anymore unless it was a serious emergency. He got super defensive, calling me uptight and accusing me of holding it over his head because he doesn't own a car. He said I'm being selfish and that friends help each other out. I don't want to be a jerk, but this is my car, and I feel like he's taking advantage. Now the atmosphere in the apartment is super tense, and he keeps making passive-aggressive comments like, "Guess I'll just walk for 2 hours to get groceries." Lita for refusing to let him borrow my car again?
Ida for snapping at my mom for telling people I'm gay. My 20M, sister 14, was reading a book yesterday when she asked me what does a Greek god look like. I asked her why she is asking me that and she showed me a passage saying a guy has the features of a Greek god. So I told her, you know, muscular and handsome. I noticed my mom giving me a weird look and asked her if something's wrong. She said nothing. Later asked me if I like my best friend 20M, because he's tall and muscular. I was taken aback. As it turns out, she had always assumed he and I are gay, which is not the case. I quickly told her we're not gays, but she didn't believe me, saying the way we behave around each other leaves no other possible interpretation. So I told her she should stop trying to interpret and see things that are not there. She said okay before telling me she told her friends that I am gay but haven't come out to her yet, and that she was worried about me keeping it bottled up inside. I snapped at her for it. I have nothing against gays, but I don't want them to think I'm one when I'm not, since it'll only lead to awkwardness. Not to mention one of them has a daughter I have a crush on, and might ask out. She said she only told them because she was worried about me, and wanted some advice on what to do.
Lita for telling my mill if she keeps rearranging my kitchen she can get a hotel room. I 29F, am married to a wonderful man, 30M, who is also the brother of my best friend. Our heights are very different, with me being 6 feet 6 inches and him being 5 feet 7 inches. All of his family are on the short side, and it led to some adjustments in our living arrangements at first, but we found what worked for us. We realized early on that it was easier for him to use a step stool to reach what he needed in the kitchen than for me to constantly be crouching to get what I need, as that gets painful quickly. For me, this was fine, until my mill came to stay with us 2 weeks ago. Her roof needs repairs, my husband and I have a spare room, while my best friend doesn't, so it was only logical she come stay with us. She has constantly been moving things about in the kitchen, lowering items as she doesn't want to use the step stool, which isn't anything to do with her age or fearing she'll fall, she just doesn't want to. She keeps harping on about how it's ridiculous everything is so high up, and it's rude for guests. My husband has repeatedly shut her down, stating my comfort matters more than theoretical guests, and asked her not to move things. She lets it go for a day, then things are moved again. I've expressed frustration to my husband about this, and the final straw came today, when I went to make myself a coffee, and could not find my coffee mugs anywhere. It took me 5 minutes to find them in my kitchen, and I found them in the lower cabinet, that I had to kneel to get them out of. Period. I was angry and snappish at this as my back had hurt from getting my mug, and I told her if she couldn't stop herself from rearranging my kitchen she could get a hotel room, as I have had enough of her entitlement. This led to a lot of blustering and some tears that she was just trying to make it make more sense, and how this is her son's home, and how it's just a little reorganization, and that they shouldn't suffer just because I'm tall. She then also began to say how I'm heartless to expect her to stay in a hotel over the holidays. My husband was clearly uncomfortable at this, and didn't want his mother upset, but he told her that it wasn't just his home, but mine too, and if she wouldn't respect my comfort and happiness, then she would have to leave. She has went into the guest room and I can hear her crying still. My husband is clearly getting anxious and upset over this, but he's not backing down, and I feel awful that my snapping led to him feeling like this. Maybe I should have just put up with it or been more gentle about how I dealt with it. I honestly don't care that she's upset, which may make me sound heartless, but I hate that my husband is feeling this way. Lita for making a scene at the airport. Oh, this happened yesterday, and I'm still fuming. I 33F was at the airport for an international flight. I got there super early because I hate the stress of rushing through security. The line was long, but moving steadily. Everyone was waiting patiently, except for one guy. Out of nowhere, this man, probably mid-40s, wearing a suit and carrying a fancy briefcase, breezed past the entire line, and tried to cut in right at the front. The TSA agent briefly questioned him, but the guy said something about being late for a very important meeting, and just like that, they let him through. I couldn't believe it. I said, loudly enough for others to hear, "Oh, so the rest of us just wasted our time lining up, huh?" A few people murmured in agreement, but most stayed quiet. The TSA agent glared at me and said, "He's got priority clearance." Here's the thing, this guy didn't have priority clearance. I overheard him earlier while we were waiting to remove our shoes, saying he missed his first flight because he was at the bar too long. He was bragging about it. I wasn't going to let this slide. I raised my voice and said, "Priority clearance doesn't cover cutting the line because you were drinking, does it?" The guy turned around, rolled his eyes, and said, "Some of us have places to be, unlike you." That set me off. I told him it was rude to assume his time was more valuable than everyone else's, and that if he wanted to skip the line, he should plan his day better. The TSA agent told me to calm down and move along, but by now people behind me were chiming in, backing me up. The guy eventually walked off without another word, but now I feel like maybe I overreacted. My partner, who was with me, thinks I should have just let it go because it's not worth the hassle. A few people clapped when I said my piece, but others looked annoyed that I held up the line for a mini drama. So, Aida for calling him out and making a scene, or should I have just swallowed my pride and let it slide?
The Unsolved Locker 103 Incident. I've never told anyone this before, but back in high school there was a mystery that still haunts me to this day. It's been years, and I can't shake the feeling that something bigger was at play. It all started my junior year. Locker assignments came out the week before school started, and I was given locker 103. It seemed like any other dented, beat-up locker in the hallway. But as soon as I opened it, I noticed something strange. Taped to the back wall was a faded Polaroid photo of 3 students standing in the same hallway, smiling. The weird thing? I didn't recognize any of them, and I knew almost everyone in my small-town high school. Curious, I took the photo to the front office. The secretary, Mrs. Robbins, frowned when she saw it. "You found this in locker 103?" she asked, her tone sharp. When I nodded, she muttered something under her breath and then said, "Leave it with me. That locker's always been problematic." Problematic? That was a strange way to describe a locker. But before I could ask what she meant, she waved me off. The next day, the photo was gone, but something new had appeared. Scrawled inside the locker door was a message. "Find us. We're still here." I felt a chill run down my spine. I didn't know who "we" was or what this meant. Over the next few weeks, more weird things started happening. Random books would show up in my locker that weren't mine. One was a yearbook from 1985. Flipping through it, I found the same 3 students from the Polaroid. They were seniors that year, and their names were crossed out in red pen. No one I asked remembered them, not even the teachers who had been there for decades. Then came the night of the homecoming game. I stayed late to help clean up after the pep rally. Walking past the lockers, I heard faint whispering. I froze. The hallway was empty except for me, but the sound was unmistakable. Soft voices coming from locker 103. Terrified, I opened it. Inside, there was nothing but my backpack. But as I stood there, I swear I heard a faint laugh behind me. I spun around, but no one was there. The next morning, the locker was gone, replaced with a blank wall like it had never existed. When I asked about it, Mrs. Robbins told me there was no locker 103. She said I must have been mistaken. To this day, I still don't know what happened. The photo, the whispers, the disappearing locker, it's like the school erased them all. Sometimes I wonder if I imagined it, but deep down I know I didn't. Does anyone else have a story like this? Something they can't explain? Maybe it's time I stop trying to forget and start digging for answers.